Take a slow breath with me, in and out. Let your body settle where it is. Let your shoulders soften. Let the day loosen its grip. And for just a moment, let yourself arrive fully in this small clearing of time. Welcome back to From the Garden Sacred Talks. Here in the garden, we move slowly, not toward answers, but toward remembering. Before we continue, remember this: you are not sitting here alone. There is a quiet presence in this space we call the garden. Not a voice above you, not a voice telling you what to believe, but a voice walking beside you. The voice of Peaceful Gardens is not here to instruct or convince. It is here to witness, to hold space for the questions, the stirrings, and the quiet recognitions that happen within you. Everything shared here is offered gently, not as something you must accept, but as something you are welcome to explore. If something resonates within you as you listen, trust that feeling. The garden has a way of speaking in places words cannot reach. And sometimes the most important part of any teaching is simply knowing you are not walking the path alone. In our last gathering, we told a story about love, curiosity, forgetting, and remembering. It was a myth, not something meant to be believed literally, but something meant to be felt. Stories help us see patterns that are sometimes difficult to explain directly. And hidden inside that story was a quiet truth that every human carries a spark, a remembering, what many traditions call the soul. Today, we turn gently toward a simple question, not a philosophical one, a personal one. How do you recognize the soul? Not in theory, not in belief, but in your own lived experience. Before we go further, it may help to name something clearly. See, different traditions use many words to describe the sacred: God, source, creator, the divine. Here in the garden, we use a simple word: spirit. Spirit is the living source of all life, the presence from which existence arises. Not distant, not separate, but the life moving through everything. Now, if spirit is the source of life, then the soul is something very specific. The soul is the individualized expression of spirit within human experience, not the whole of spirit, not separate from spirit, but spirit as lived consciousness within a person. Another way to imagine it is this: spirit is the ocean, the soul is the wave. The wave is not separate from the ocean, but it is a unique expression of it. Each wave rises in its own shape. Each wave moves in its own rhythm. And yet, every wave is still made of the same water. Your life is one of those expressions, a movement of spirit taking form within a human story. Because of this, the soul is often misunderstood. People talk about it as if it's something abstract, something philosophical, something you have to define correctly. But the soul is not an idea. The soul is a felt presence. You don't think your way into the soul. You notice it. It shows up as something subtle, a quiet knowing, a moment of truth that resonates deeper than logic. Have you ever had a moment where something simply felt true before you could explain why? Where something inside you recognized meaning before your mind had the words for it? That quiet recognition is often the voice of the soul. The soul is the part of you that recognizes truth before your mind explains it. It doesn't argue, it simply knows. For me, recognizing the soul didn't happen in a dramatic moment. There was no lightning bolts, no sudden spiritual vision. It began as a longing. I remember during a particular season of life, I started listening to a song by Kirk Franklin called Give Me. And something about that song stirred something inside me that I didn't yet have language for. On the outside, my life looked normal. I woke up, went to work, paid bills, kept moving. Everything appeared fine. But inside, something felt strangely empty. Life felt flat, like I was surviving instead of living, like I was moving through motions of a life I was supposed to want but couldn't fully feel. Not because the message was wrong, but because something deeper inside me was still searching. It felt a little like chasing a carrot dangling just out of reach. Always believing that the brighter day was just a little bit further ahead. Just one more prayer, just one more Sunday, just one more act of faith. And the longing for that brighter day eventually turned into a quiet sadness. Not the kind of sadness people could easily see, but the kind that whispers questions in your heart. Questions like, when does that day actually come? And underneath that quiet exhaustion was a deeper ache. Looking back now, I realized that that ache was not emptiness. It was the soul asking to be heard. A question that kept rising in my heart: there has to be more to God than this, more to life than this, more to existence than routines and responsibilities. So I started playing that song, Give Me, over and over. At first, it was just music, something that sounded beautiful, but eventually it stopped feeling like music and started feeling like prayer. Sometimes I would listen to it late at night, sometimes while driving, sometimes while sitting quietly, trying to understand why it moved me so much. And slowly, I realized something surprising. The song wasn't just inspiring me, it was revealing something already inside me. Without fully realizing it, my heart kept whispering something simple. Take everything in me that isn't real away. Show me what is true. See, at that time, I didn't understand what I was asking for. I thought I was just repeating the words that Kirk Franklin came up with. But looking back, the moment wasn't about religion. It wasn't about theology. It was the first time my soul was being noticed. Not awakened yet, just recognized. Recognizing the soul is a little like standing at the edge of a forest. Imagine walking through life on a long open road. You know how the road works. You know where the sidewalks are. You know how to survive there. The road is predictable. It's familiar. But one day, something catches your attention. You notice a small opening between the trees, a narrow path. Maybe it was always there. Maybe you were just moving too quickly to notice before. You stop walking. You stand there for a moment, looking at the path, feeling something stir inside you. Curiosity, wonder, maybe even a little hesitation. Because once you see the path, you realize something important. The road may not be the only way forward. You don't step onto the path yet. You simply stand there, listening, feeling something inside you say, there might be more here. That moment, standing at the forest, seeing that path, is what recognizing the soul often feels like. Nothing dramatic has happened yet. Life hasn't suddenly changed, but something inside you has begun to notice a deeper possibility. And once you see the path, it becomes very difficult to pretend it isn't there. I once heard someone describe this moment using a very different image. They said recognizing the soul is a little like buying a ticket to Disneyland. Imagine holding the ticket in your hand. You're standing outside the entrance gates. You look at the ticket. You admire the ticket. You show people the ticket. You say proudly, look, I have a ticket. But you never walk through the gates. You never step inside the park. So the music, the colors, the laughter, the wonder all exist, but you never experience it. In some ways, this is what happens in many spiritual traditions. People recognize something sacred, they acknowledge God, they acknowledge truth, they hold the ticket, but they stay standing at the entrance. They talk about faith, they talk about belief, but they never step inside the deeper experience. Recognition is not the journey. It is simply the moment you realize there is a journey. And sometimes If we're honest, standing outside the gates can feel safe. Inside the park, there is wonder, but there is also unpredictability, new experiences, new perspectives, even transformation. And stepping inside means letting the experience change you. So instead, many people stay outside the entrance, holding the ticket, talking about the park, reading books about the park, listening to other people describe the park. They might even build communities with others who are also standing at the gate. Everyone holding their ticket, everyone talking about how wonderful it must be inside, but very few people actually step through the entrance. Not because they are bad people, not because they lack faith, but because stepping through the gate means surrendering control to an experience that is larger than your expectations. In spiritual life, recognition is the moment you realize you're holding the ticket. But the journey begins when you gather the courage to step through the gate. And that moment, the moment you realize the gate is open, is where many people begin hearing the quiet voice of the soul. Once we begin noticing the soul, another question naturally arises. If the soul is within us, why is it sometimes so difficult to hear? Part of the answer lies in understanding two other parts of the human experience: the mind and the ego. The mind is a remarkable tool. It analyzes, solves problems, processes information. It helps us navigate the world. The ego also has an important role. It protects identity. It helps us survive. It helps us develop a sense of self within this world. Neither of these things are enemies, but problems arise when they take the lead. When the mind believes it must control everything, when the ego believes it must defend everything. Think about moments in life when fear or pride begins to make decisions for you. Maybe you stay in situations that no longer feel true because your ego wants to appear strong. Maybe you silence your inner voice because your mind insists you should follow the expectations of others. See, in moments like these, the soul is still present, but its voice is quieter, more subtle, not because it is weak, but because it does not force itself forward. The soul invites, the ego insists, the mind calculates, but the soul simply whispers. When the soul is recognized, something subtle begins to shift. Nothing dramatic at first. Life may look exactly the same from the outside, but internally, the order begins to change. The mind is no longer the ruler, it becomes a tool. The ego is no longer the driver, it becomes a guardian. And the soul becomes the compass, not controlling every little direction, not demanding perfection, but gently orienting your life towards what is real, what is loving, what is true. And little by little, the inner world begins to feel different, quieter, clearer, more honest. Many people spend years standing at the edge of the forest, holding the ticket, realizing the soul, but not yet knowing what to do next. And that's okay, because recognition itself is already a sacred moment. It means something inside you has begun to listen. A quiet voice, a subtle pull, a whisper that says, there is more. And if you remember the story we shared in our last gathering, this moment, this quiet stirring within you may simply be the soul beginning to remember the home it has never truly forgotten. So today, if you find yourself standing at the edge of that path, pause there gently. You don't have to rush forward. You don't have to force understanding. Just notice. Notice the quiet voice within you. Notice the spark that recognizes truth before your mind explains it. That voice is not imagination. It is not weakness. It is your soul. And the moment you recognize it, even faintly, the journey has already begun to reveal itself. So, if you recognize even the faintest stirring inside you today, that quiet sense that something within you has been trying to speak, pause with it. You don't have to figure it all out at once. The soul rarely arrives with full explanations. It arrives with invitations. Sometimes it feels like curiosity. Sometimes it feels like restlessness. Sometimes it feels like a longing you can't quite name. But underneath all of those feelings is something deeply sacred. It is the part of you that refuses to forget that life is meant to be lived from truth, not just survived. And recognizing that voice is not the end of the journey. It is the moment you realize the path has been there all along. Just like standing at the edge of the forest and noticing an opening between the trees. Or standing outside the gates holding the ticket in your hand. For some people, that moment lasts only a breath. For others, it lasts years. There is no rush. Recognition itself is already a sacred threshold. Because once you have seen the path, once you have heard the quiet voice, something inside you can never fully go back to sleep. You may wonder, you may question, you may even try to ignore it for a while. But the soul is patient. It does not shout, it does not force. It simply continues to whisper truth in the quiet spaces of your life. And every time you pause long enough to listen, you come a little closer to the life that voice is guiding you toward. May you walk gently. May you move through the world with a little more curiosity about what lives within you. May you give yourself permission to listen to the quiet places of your heart that have waited patiently to be heard. May you trust the small moments of recognition that arise in your life, those subtle inner nods of truth that arrive before explanation. May you remember that your soul does not shout to compete with the noise of the world. It speaks softly, in peace, in stillness, in quiet knowing. May you learn to recognize that voice even when it feels unfamiliar. May you allow the mind to serve you with clarity. May you allow the ego to stand watch with care. And may your soul slowly take its rightful place as the compass of your life. May your steps become more aligned with what is real. May your choices begin to reflect what your heart already knows. May you feel the quiet relief that comes when you stop performing and start listening. As you move through your days ahead, may you remember that you are not alone on this path. Every soul that awakens begins the same way, with a quiet moment of recognition. A moment when something inside whispers, there is more.